Hey everybody, it's Nick again, and today we're going to talk about the new or currently in preview, the Dataverse low-code plugins. But in this context, I'm going to tell you how you could use Dataverse low-code plugins in your Power Pages site. So if we can see the documentation, we see that it is still in preview, which basically means that you shouldn't be using it on production systems because if there are any kind of support issues, support may not be able to bail you out. Really for you to try things out, experiment, provide feedback to Microsoft, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But basically, what are low-code plugins? So the plugins have been something that have been around since the early days of CRM. Originally, they were called callouts, and then they became plugins where you could write code in C# or VB.NET. You would use Visual Studio, you would create DLLs, you would create pre-images, post-images, steps, different things. You would take this configuration, upload it to your Dataverse environment, and then be able to run that server-side logic on the code. So it could do things like a lot of calculations, could look up references to other data, could do a whole bunch of different things. And of course, today, plugins are a very integral part in Fusion teams. Pro-code developers develop a lot of plugins for enterprise Dataverse projects. However, this new thing with the Dataverse low-code plugins allows makers or low-code builders to also build plugins using Power Effects. Now, they're not quite as powerful as what a pro-code you could develop a plugin. However, for someone like myself, I haven't written a plugin in probably, I'd even hate to look at the calendar, probably a couple years anyway. So every time that I need to create a plugin, I have to load up Visual Studio Professional or Enterprise, figure out how I wrote that particular plugin, and probably spend a lot of steps. This way, I can actually open up an app and use Power Effects and basically write some code within Power Effects to basically do a lot of the same things I would have done when I've written a plugin. Now, again, from Power Pages standpoint, there's a lot you could do here, especially in multi-step forms when you're updating Dataverse data at each step, but maybe you want some back-end server logic to run to do something. In our particular use case, what we're going to do is we're going to have an application form where someone who's signing up for a volunteer could actually put in their email address. Now, this could be for a membership, this could be for a whole bunch of different things. And then the plugin, what it will do, it will see if that email already exists in the contact table. And if it does, it's going to update our application table. And then once that application table has been updated, we could use that result of that in our multi-step form in a conditional statement. A lot of pieces at play here, but hopefully you'll be able to see how valuable the Dataverse low-code plugins can be for your Power Pages projects. So normally I would start in showing you the code, but I'm going to actually start at the end. This is going to be our end result. We have a Power Pages site. It's for a volunteer org, and we have the button that's going to become a volunteer. This is going to kick off a multi-step process. And the very first thing it's going to ask is for an email. So I'm just going to type in an email address, nick@test.com. And we're going to hit next. And very much like any other kind of application process in a Power Pages site or any website for that matter, this should be pretty straightforward. And we're going to ask me for the rest of the information so I can fill that in and submit the form. Pretty straightforward stuff. And now I've filled in my form, I'm going to submit that. And submission completed successfully. Very simple multi-step form. If you've built multi-step forms, you're probably very familiar with this process. Now let's do this again. However, this time I'm going to put in the email address of a contact that already exists in the Dataverse that's behind the scenes here. So for example, if I have a list of contacts here, I see it's someone at example, someone_j@example.com. So we know this particular contact, Paul Cannon sample, exists in our Dataverse environment, in our contacts. So let's actually plug this email address into our site and see what happens. So we're back here. Let's put in that email address, someone_@example.com, and we hit next. And now we get the message, you appear to already be in our system. Of course, as a contact, please sign in to see volunteer opportunities. So we'll just click here on the sign in button, and this will take us to the sign in page where that particular user could now sign in. And maybe if they forgot their password, they could go through that out process. That's a little bit outside of the scope of what we're talking about today. Really, we're going to talk about how to use that Dataverse low-code plugin to be able to help facilitate us creating that multi-step form. So I'm in the solution here and I've created a table called volunteer application. Pretty simple. I've added a whole series of columns like an auto number for the application number, of course, first name, last name, quick check here, full name. Again, I've actually used the Power Effects in here. So you can use Power Effects columns, which is also, I believe, still preview, but then you could use those in your Power Pages site as well. This is just creating the full name by concatenating the first name, last name. Let's not dwell too much on this. We'll close this panel for now. The other one I wanted to point out here is this choice field I created called existing contact. What this allows me to do is this is going to be the result of my plugin. I basically have a bunch of choices here. So let's just take a look at the different choices. If we have a single match found, meaning we found one email address, or if we found multiple matches, so then maybe we want to kick off a duplicate cleanup process, that kind of thing. Or ultimately, if we have a no match found, meaning we did not find a match. So those are the results. Now, how do we populate this particular choice field? This is where we're going to use the Dataverse low-code plugin. So that being said, how do we get to that? So we're going to have to go to the Power Apps app to find that. So I went to Power Apps. We have something here called the Dataverse Accelerator app. So let's run this. This is going to be installed automatically on your environments. Yes, I know Microsoft likes to do things to your Dataverse environments, and it's going to eat up all your capacity and all those other horrible things. These are actually tools that are very helpful and beneficial. So this is something that should be no problem for you. This is going to be very helpful in the future. So here we have both instant plugins and automated plugins. In this particular case, that check email is an automated plugin. To do this, I would just go to new plugin and create either an instant or automated. Notice with the instant plugins, we do have the ability to do input and output parameters. So we can use those in classic workflows and Power Automate flows and a bunch of different things. In this particular case, we are going to use automated. And in automated, we have a few less options, but it's still pretty cool. I'm just going to go into the edit plugin here. And first thing you're going to do, give it a display name. This is something so you know what it actually does. And then we want to choose the table. Now the table is what the action will happen, and those actions can be created or gets updated or gets deleted. These are things that are going to trigger the particular process. In this case, I'm going to choose created. I've chosen my table vol_volunteer application. We can pick that from the drop down. And then here is where I'm going to put in our Power Effects expression. Now, this is quite a bit of Power Effects code. Basically, it's a switch statement. I'm going to do a count. I'm counting using countif. Countif is a Power Effects function. Basically, you pass it a table with a particular parameter, and this will return the number of matches that has. So we're not really caring who the contact is at this point. Really, we just want to see if there is a match on that email. So I'm going to choose countif context as C. The reason why we do this as C is because we're going to be using the this record object. This record object, if we don't use that, will actually look at the contacts where we actually want this record to look at this particular table. Kind of complicated. I actually struggled a little bit with this, but thankfully I posted this question on the GitHub for Power Effects, and I got an answer right away in my blog. I've did a nice shout out to the person that helped me out. I really appreciate it. Anyways, that basically would return the number of matches, basically the number of emails that match in contacts to the email that we would have keyed in that field. And then if it's one, it's going to update a single match or a multiple match or no matches at all, going through how many it returned. So pretty straightforward switch patch statements. I don't want to get too deeply into Power Effects in this particular video, but that's the gist of it. Do notice that this contact is underlined here. So this operation on table contact may not work if it has more than 1,000 rows. So this kind of goes into some of the delegation problems you could run into. This is where potentially, if this was a real production situation, we probably would go the pro code approach. We would launch Visual Studio Professional, and then we would actually write this in C#, and then we'd be able to accommodate for those if there's millions of records, which if you've worked in large enterprise applications, you've probably run into that. So anyways, this is really just to kind of demonstrate how we could use low-code plugins in Power Pages. So we've created all this code. We don't have to worry about any of those operations. I am going to do it post-operation, meaning we want it to run after the record gets created. The other little thing here is there is a connection reference, so we can connect to other services outside of Dataverse, which is pretty cool. So now that our plugin's created, we'll just hit save, and then we're going to go back and build out the rest of our multi-step form. So I'm back here in the Power Pages Design Studio. I'm going to go to the data workspace. And of course, we want to make sure that we're choosing our solution here on the little gear icon, so any changes we make will appear in that solution. I have the volunteer application here. Let's take a look at some of the forms. Now, this is something I like to do for multi-step. I like to create a form for each step. Well, actually, you do need to create a form for most of the steps. So I have this one, get email. This is pretty straightforward. We're just going to be asking for the email address from our user. All right, so see, we have the email address. That's step one. Let's take a look at our next step. It's going to be new volunteer. And this is where we're going to collect the rest of the volunteer information. So the first step will create the record. The next step will actually update the record. Now, the other form that we're going to have, if that contact exists, so that where when the plugin runs, if it returns that there's a contact, in terms of our multi-step form condition, we actually want to display a message. Now here I just have a blank form. I'm going to show you a trick that basically is going to allow me just to show a message without having to enter or look at any data. We could have added some other information here on a read-only basis if we really wanted to, but let's just leave it blank for now. So here I'm on the page where I've added that multi-step form. Just a quick little recap. You basically, in order to do this, if you just have a section here, you have that multi-step form where you would go in and you would, create a new multi-step form based on a particular table. And there's a lot of tutorials and explanations on how to do that. So I'm not going to really go too deeply into that. So for now, let's just, we'll just zap that. And let's go, kill that section. Let's go here, the one we created earlier. So we've created this. Our first step here is the, let's look at our step settings. We choose the step name. We selected the form, step one, get email. And in terms of our more options, at this point, we are creating a new record. That's our first step. So we're going to create that record. Now it's going to create that record only with the email address. Now remember, our plugin is going to trigger on create of that record. So it's going to kick in and do that logic. So let's look at our next step here. That's the first step. The next one is a check if email exists. That is a conditional. We can't make conditional steps in the Design Studio currently. We're going to go into the Power Pages Management app, or also known as the Portal Management app. Before we do that, let's just take a quick look at the volunteer information. So this is where if there is no match on the email, we would collect that information, which in this particular case, it is going to, instead of creating a new record, is going to update the existing record because we already created that with the application by putting in the email address. I know I'm jumping around a little bit here. And basically, multi-step forms can be a little bit confusing, and I'm hopefully not making it more confusing. What we're going to do now is we're going to go into the Power Pages Management app and take a look at the whole process. So let's just go into, I'm going to go into the Portal Management app. And here's that multi-step form volunteer application, the website. We're choosing the start step, which is asking for the email. Let's take a look at the form steps. So first step is get email address. So we're going there, we're loading the form. Remember, we're loading the, if we go to the form definition, we're loading that get email form. This is the way we used to create multi-step forms before the Design Studio. It's, it is using the model-driven Power Pages Management app. It is a little clunky. This is where it's always a good idea to do a Visio diagram. So if you actually check out the accompanying blog post, I have a copy of that Visio diagram that goes to the steps, and I use that as a guide when I'm creating multi-step forms. Anyways, so the first one, we're getting the email. That's all good. Let's look at the next step. We're going to go check if that contact exists. This is a conditional step that we have to use the Power Pages Management app to configure. So here it is type condition. Again, I'm still looking at that volunteer application table. Now, if I take a look at the condition tab, I have the schema name, which is vol_existing contact. This is the column that gets updated by the plugin. And remember, we looked at that plugin code. It was updating that, and we're seeing it if it equals to 95171003, which basically means no contact, meaning they did not find a contact. So if that's the case, what we want to do is go into the collect that volunteer information, meaning this is a brand new volunteer, let's collect the information. Then there could be other processes to turn it into contact, again, going on beyond here. Now, if it fails, meaning that there is a volunteer that exists, we are going to go into that next step. And here is where we have that read-only form that I showed you earlier, that we didn't have any information on that. So we're going to basically make that strictly a read-only form. Now, the difference is here, if I scroll down, I see that we have instructions here. And this is where I put in that message that you appear to be already been in our systems. Please sign in to see volunteer opportunities. So basically, this is how we're getting that message to show up. Again, this was kind of going a little bit beyond the scope of what we're really talking about here, but I just wanted to kind of point out the things that you can do with multi-step forms. All right. So our next step after this is to redirect to the sign-in page, because we've given that message, and all this is just a straight redirect. If it is a type redirect, then we're just going to put in here. I got the full URL. There's probably a better way to do it with a shortcut or something, but this is just going to take the user to the sign-in page. So that's the whole steps that we have here. If we go back to our list of steps, actually, if I go to the multi-step form, take a look at our form steps, we have 5 different steps here. Starts at email, checks the condition. If the contact doesn't exist, we're going to add it for volunteer information. That's the end of the line there. Or if it does exist, we're going to show that message and then just redirect. So basically a 5-step in our multi-step process. Really, though, that first step is what triggers that Dataverse low-code plugin, which we can use in our condition. So this is actually, it is a simple example, but it's pretty powerful, because now we could use those low-code plugins to do other calculations, whether it's a tax or a shipping calculation, maybe checking if something's in inventory, and that could display back in our multi-step form to our end users and actually make some conditional decisions based on that. So I'm really interested to hear what kind of use cases you might dream up for using low-code plugins in your Power Pages sites. Hope you enjoyed this video. Check back again next time and for more exciting stuff on the Power Platform.